Okay, and welcome everybody to the parallel session this morning on resilience and well-being. I'd like to say just first of all to welcome Niamh Bruce, who has joined us there and who's our first speaker. And I'll be welcoming the other speakers in turn. We have 4 speakers at this session. So Niamh is going to begin, and her presentation is called Well, I Don't Like Salmon Now, followed by Dr. Siobhan Smyth from the School of Nursing and Midwifery. I'll be doing a short presentation as well, and then Bernadette Phillips, a researcher and Montessori consultant, will also be giving a presentation. So just to welcome everybody to the session here today, my name is Sinead Grennan. I'm Chief Executive with Engaging Dementia, and I'll be stepping aside later this week to pursue a full-time master's in psychology, and Kim Tully will be interim CEO, and she and I are co-hosting the conference. So the conference is 2 full days, and then there's a policy and practice forum on Wednesday. So the full program is on our website. And for people who have tuned in there, who've joined us, do submit questions through the chat or through Q&A, and then we'll go through all of the talks, and then we will have a short discussion at the end. So the session will finish then at 12:45, so it'll be kind of short enough. The last thing is we're on Twitter at engagingdem.ie, and there's a hashtag DementiaConf20, so do join the conversation on Twitter. Okay, I'll now hand over to Niamh.
Thank you very much, Sinead. And I'm just going to share my screen and start the presentation. And as you'll see, Sinead said, my presentation is, Well, I Don't Like Salmon Now. And I'll go through that shortly. But I just want to point out that it is a personal reflection. It's my story. And I'm not for 1 minute saying that my experience is the same as anybody else's. Nor am I saying that my mom's journey with Alzheimer's was the same as everybody else's. But I do hope that by sharing my personal experience, there may be some triggers or resonance for others. And yes, I'm a mindfulness teacher and have been for over 15 years. So I'm coming from that perspective. So let's start there. And this is where my story began. Well, this story. For early 2005, I began working at the Sanctuary, which is a meditation center. I worked there for over 9 years, executive director and director of programs, when I made the decision to take carer's leave to look after mom in the summer of 2014. But this is where my mindfulness journey began. And I was very fortunate to have a wealth of experience and training from teachers all around the world. And also the setting. The Sanctuary invokes stillness, the ethos and the place. We gathered every morning at 9:30 for our daily practice together. And then in the summer of 2014, I swapped my life for something a little bit different, filled with school runs, my children who were nearly 2 and then 5, and my mom's journey with Alzheimer's and cancer. And it was very, very different. My world became a very new world and a very different world. And I was trying to figure out how to fit in, how to find my own way, and in particular, how to keep my own practice going. And my days were filled by the company of these 3 wonderful people. So in terms of my world, it was a very different world from being in the office, having a set schedule, having a wonderful group of staff, having structure, having teams. And some of the key challenges were particularly around the difficulty to plan anything. You know, suddenly I've gone from being able to structure, calendars, email events, programs, trainings, conferences, to, trying to leave at a set time and mom just deciding not to, or my then 2-year-old throwing a tantrum because she couldn't find her teddy bear. And there was this sense of always rushing. It was like this underlying stress that I always felt that I'm going to be late or we're not going to be able to get out. This over-caffeinated feeling in my body from 9 to 9. And in terms of the practice, I really missed this routine. I was aware suddenly of this constant chatter, not only from these 2 in the back of the car continually, but my own mind. The mind was constantly racing. But this was my new world. So how do I meet or rise to this challenge? I just want to explain a few things. Mindfulness isn't a magic wand. It doesn't have the answers. It doesn't tell me how I should be, but what it does is amazing. It creates space in the mind, space among the thoughts, space in my body, space in the moment. And just to clarify, mindfulness isn't my teacher, but what it does is it allows me to learn from my real teachers, who are these three wonderful people. So what is mindfulness? And there's many different definitions. And I've just chosen one from the Oxford Mindfulness Centre, where it says that it is a therapeutic technique that can help you manage and prevent feelings of depression, stress, anxiety, or discontent, and enables anyone who practices to live a more attentive, appreciative, and vibrant life, of which I would fully agree, but it is challenging. And another quote from the OMC is this: to be aware of your own experience moment to moment without judgment. The trainings I mainly qualified in is the MBSR, which was designed as a pain management, early 1980s by John Kabat-Zinn, and it began as a hospital-based intervention. I also was fortunate to train in MBCT, and that was originally developed for relapse prevention in depression, and now even has developed into a school-based version through Smyth, which I teach in schools, in primary and secondary, and fortunate enough to train teachers in. But bringing it back to mindfulness and Alzheimer's, and to take a moment and to try and give my view of what it's like to be a carer. And for this, I want to bring to your attention an Elizabeth Stone quote. And she has this quote about deciding to have children, how it's a momentous decision, as if we were like having our heart forever walk around outside of your body. And this rang true to me in terms of being a carer, but I adapted it slightly to add my lungs. And what I mean by that is I became very aware that I was holding my breath a lot. I was pausing, I was taking deep exhalations of breath when I was journeying with mom. For instance, we might be coming home and see an old friend and start to talk, my mom's friend. And as soon as mom tried to explain about having Alzheimer's and how challenging it was, the friend very lovingly tried to dismiss it and say, no, it's fine. I always walk upstairs and forget what I've come to. And mom's look of frustration as I took a deep breath. Or the friends that may very noticeably cross the road when they saw us coming to avoid us. Or the deep breath I might take when my mom would look at me holding her toothbrush, knowing she was meant to do something with it, but couldn't quite figure out. And to think of your organs outside of your body, outside of the safety of the rib cage, the skin to support us, there is a huge vulnerability. And that forever heartbeat and deep breath became part of my life. So bringing it back to
the mindfulness one, yeah.
So in terms of attitude foundations of mindfulness, many of these are the attitudes we try to develop in our practice. And what I realized that it has always helped me in deepening my practice. But of course, I was seeing this every day with my mom and children. My mom, whether she wanted to do a course in mindfulness or not, had to develop these attitudes. And I had to deepen them alongside her. That non-judging. When we were out for a restaurant with my children and mom, and they'd hand my children the, child's drawings and crayons to color in, and mom would look for one too. My mom was an amazing artist, and suddenly I felt, oh no, don't give her a child's drawing. But she was happy. That's what she wanted to do. So who was I to judge it any differently? That annoying song that was very much a soundtrack at that time, but actually it was an important lesson. Mom might get frustrated about something that I did, and I would spend the next 10 minutes, half an hour, even hours, trying to figure out, what did I do? What did I say? How did I create this? Yet there was mom, and she had already let it go. Another definition of mindfulness is this, and it's something I would very much use regularly on workshops. And through our practice, we're developing that ability to be more in the present. But from an Alzheimer's point of view, the past actually becomes a pretty important place. It's a place for people and a place of connection. And also the future is something that weighs heavy in terms of care and next steps, and also in respect of my mom's palliative cancer. But actually, through my journey with Mom, there was a line I felt missing from this and other definitions. This is a phrase or definition you may have heard, whether it's from Kung Fu Panda or read it on some cushion, and it still holds true. But I think I might add the following line to this. The past and present were one thing and challenging, but what caused me the most stress was the what if or what might have been. I found with my journey with Mom, I was constantly looking at what if Mom didn't have Alzheimer's? What if this wasn't her story? And the Henry Thoreau quote really rang through. I was standing on my island of opportunities with Mom, and I kept looking out towards another land where Alzheimer's didn't exist, where Mom was the mom I always knew. And now let me bring you back to the title. And there's a story I want to share that was a real lesson for me. I remember being advised and understood that it's about, surrounding Mom with familiar things she enjoyed and loved. And one of these days I had made a big effort to make one of Mom's favorite meals. And I'd gone and made a big deal of it. And I was chuffed with myself as I handed her the plate. And Mom clearly said to me, no, I don't like salmon. At which I said, no, Mom, this is one of your favorite meals. You love salmon. At which she said, no, I don't like salmon. And I continued to reassure her that no, she loves salmon. And I have to admit, I probably said it 4 times where I told her, yeah, you do, you like salmon, until she firmly placed her hand on the table and told me, well, I don't like salmon now. And it was a turning point. It made me realize that I had to look at the person standing right in front of me. I was looking out to this island of, the mom I used to know, the mom I grew up with. And I was missing out on the person standing right beside me. And this turning point led to many lessons. These person profiles and the key profile of the person and all these wonderful services we went to. And it was a wonderful thing where they'd ask you to tell them about my mom, tell them about Mom's hobbies, her family, siblings, her children, likes and dislikes. But one thing I want to caution us is to be aware that these can change, not to pin them to the collar. Mom may have had a hobby for 3 decades, but she may not like to do it anymore. And to be careful to listen to the person standing in front of you, whether it's the Alzheimer's that has changed it, or she just no longer likes what she used to like for several years. Also, the lesson of seeing the whole picture. Mom had many hospital appointments, both for the Alzheimer's, but also many other complications in palliative cancer. We were going for an appointment where she had an MRI, followed by several other appointments in the hospital. I waited in the waiting room while she had her X-ray. She came out and we were rushing on to the next appointment. Mom seemed very stressed and was agitated, but I didn't have time. We needed to get to the next appointment. We got there and I tried to go up to the desk and I said, I'm going to leave you for a minute and I'm going to register you, Mom. At which she got really upset and angry and thought I was leaving her in a home for good. I didn't quite understand, and we got through the day. It wasn't until that evening when I was talking with Mom and my husband about the day's events. And when I got to the point of saying about when Mom had the MRI, Mom got very agitated and said it was horrible, horrible noise. And then it clicked with me. Mom had been in a situation where it was really, really distressing noise, and it just unfolded. That lesson I learned was, one, never to let her go in for an X-ray or an MRI on her own again, and also not to make appointments afterwards. And it's something I would love for radiography departments to also take in mind. Maybe inform the carer, let them know, make these amendments. And also that understanding of the orange wristband. And it's there for good measure. In hospitals, it denotes the patients that might have a dementia or Alzheimer's. And yes, it's important, to add that extra care, but not if we don't look beyond the orange wristbands. Everybody with Alzheimer's isn't the same. It doesn't mean that because my mom had an orange wristband, she couldn't engage in conversation. She couldn't be spoken to. And there was many healthcare professionals that did this really well. Just one I want to speak about is her palliative consultant and mom's journey with cancer and on many medications. I was becoming quite concerned about levels of toxicity, her bowels, etc. And I spoke to Dr. Higgins with my mom and how I was worried about too much sugar in her diet. She wasn't eating the balanced meals anymore. All she wanted was cake. And in that instance, Dr. Higgins did something really beautifully. He listened to every word I said. He heard me. And then he turned and looked at Mom and with a smile said, "You can eat as much sugar as you want, Dolores." And my mom's face lit up. And that was the perfect thing to do because I heard clearly and in a lovely way. Dr. Higgins, allayed my fears and also made Mom very, very happy. Gifts that mindfulness can give you as a carer. We develop the ability to observe the thoughts. And I realized that I was feeling a lot that I hadn't got a choice in this new world. And the importance that we always have a choice. What I would teach to people who do courses with me and workshops, I now had to really take it in for myself. The Viktor Frankl quote, Viktor Frankl, who was a survivor of Auschwitz and other concentration camps, spoke that we always have a space and the power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Mindfulness creates that space for me. It allows me to be with my feelings, aware and sit with them as they come and go. And it was an emotional roller coaster. To be able to name those feelings. But also the freedom of knowing you are not your thoughts and your feelings. And during my time, I had many thoughts and feelings, and some scary. But understanding that they were what I was having then, but they didn't make me. That freedom was empowering. And it's that understanding that mindful moments are everywhere, even where you least expect it. I had to find new places to practice. One of the times in hospital, Mom was agitated and we went outside. In James's, they had this lovely green area in front. It was cold and I put my coat over Mom. And when I pulled the hood up, she started to laugh. I took out my phone to be able to share with my siblings to show that she was happy. But also it was that beginning of documenting those lessons for me to be able to look at those beautiful moments. Yes, it was a difficult time in casualty, but actually there were some beautiful moments. Another time in A&E, we had to go in quite urgently and it was a Sunday morning and it happened to be Valentine's Day. And I was in A&E with Mom and I was getting a notification and WhatsApp messages about people sharing their, day with their loved one, going off for brunch and having special times. And I was feeling jealous. I was feeling, regretful that here we were in A&E, not where I wanted to be. And the emotion started to take over me and I needed to take a deep breath. And I remember taking a deep breath and just looking over at Mom and realizing I was actually spending my Valentine's Day with my first true love, of whom Mom was. Mindfulness allows you to create space and allows you to catch yourself. And to share another little story, there was a day when I was really busy. I had settled Mom on the sofa, given her a cup of tea, and I said to the children they can play around, and I was trying to get on top of the laundry. And I was really busy doing stuff, and I got really frustrated because I could see the body underneath the sheets that I was trying to dry. And I instantly got annoyed at my son Oscar for messing up things. And I could feel the anger rising in me. And I became aware of my feet on the floor. And when I looked down, I noticed that Oscar was actually hiding under the table. And then I looked over to the couch and realized Mom wasn't sitting on the sofa anymore. And I had time to take out my camera and photo the next few moments, which was a magical moment between Nana and her grandchildren. And had I got caught up in the anger and shouted at Oscar, I would have taken away this beautiful moment. So there's many learnings that I've had in terms of journeying with Mom until her final in 2017. And also grateful to my practice for allowing me to really savor those moments. Caring for Mom, there was so much to enjoy, to savor, and it was all those little moments. Mindfulness allows me to take a deep breath and really enjoy Mom. And I want to share this moment. Another day when I was in the cafe and I was just worried about things and trying to work through, and I looked over at my mom and my daughter and I thought, gosh, you two have it.
Is this your dancing lunch?
So I just want to begin by finishing and saying that applying mindfulness as a full-time carer is a challenge, but it's also a nourishment, life-saving skill and an utter joy. And it allowed me a lot of nourishment. And to finish by sharing the biggest gift. This time that we had was truly the biggest gift. And for that, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my practice. I'm grateful for mindfulness. And I'm grateful for the challenges. I'm not grateful for the Alzheimer's, but the challenges that have arisen because of it. But above all, I'm grateful for this woman who was always a wonderful mother. But her final 3 years, wow, she taught me what it means to be human. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Niamh, for such a moving piece, and thank you for sharing so much. And I had the honour to meet Dolores a good number of times at the cafe with yourself, and lots of memories to treasure there as well. So thank you. I'll now introduce Siobhan Smyth, who is Dr. Siobhan Smyth, our next speaker from the School of Nursing and Midwifery, and she will be exploring the feasibility and acceptability of CREST. And I will let you explain I will hand over to you straight away, Siobhan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just very moved, Niamh, by your presentation. I don't know how I'm going to follow the footsteps here, but you give me a lovely story a few moments like I have known her from that presentation. Thank you very much for sharing that. I hope in this presentation I also will see how important it is for carers to get involved and the challenge it is for them to look after somebody with dementia. I'm Siobhan, as I've been described as, and I work in a School of Nursing and Midwifery at the National University of Ireland, Galway. I'm a lecturer there, but we've got involved in this feasibility and acceptability study it's called CREST. So I'll be referring to CREST a lot, but it's to do with the comprehensive resilience building psychosocial intervention for people with dementia in the community. And it was a non-randomised feasibility study. But first, I also want to thank you very much for being here today and being able to share these findings with you. We just finished the findings of this study last week. So it has been a very big study, and I'm delighted to be here. Okay, so this is just the team. This study has been funded by the Health Research Board of Ireland, and it has been led by Professor Dimna Casey, and this is the team. Priscilla and Niamh and myself also was on the team. Just a little bit about the background. A dementia diagnosis may prevent people with dementia from participating in anxiety, but they can live a meaningful life if a supportive psychosocial environment exists. And I think listening to some of the preliminary sessions this morning and everything, that seems to be very much coming out, that if there is a good support psychosocial environment available, then it does make a difference for the person living with dementia. The resilience theory may provide a scaffold on which a multifaceted psychosocial supportive intervention can be built. So what we've done, we looked at the literature, we identified there was 3 psychosocial interventions: cognitive stimulation therapy, CST, physical exercise, and education. And what we hypothesized was that if we combine these 3 elements, because they have been in the literature as separate, but if we combine these 3 elements as a novel, multifaceted, psychosocial resilient building intervention, simultaneously targeting the personal attributes and the external assets of people with dementia, then this is actually, in effect, this is when CREST was born, by combining these 3 elements together as that resilient building intervention. So I hope I can bring you through this journey now in the next few slides. Just again, it was a single arm, non-randomized. It wasn't, it wasn't a randomized trial, it was just non-randomized trial. And the aim was to assess the feasibility and acceptability of an intervention with people with memory problems, stroke dementia, and their caregivers living in the community, to inform a larger scale study in the future. So we hope that we will get money, and from some recommendations from this, we may be able to do a full randomized or CT, as they call it, as abbreviation, randomized feasibility study. So there was 3 parts, as I mentioned earlier. We had the 3 interrelated components: the cognitive stimulation therapy, the physical exercise, and the dementia. Just to come back to the physical exercise, we recruited older people in the community who was a buddy to the people with dementia. They assisted the people with dementia during the exercise program. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on. The dementia education, we had 3 components. We had an education component for GP, we had an education component for the carers, and also we had a community education for the public as well. This just gives a brief sort of overview of what the intervention looked like. So we have, it was over 15 weeks. We had 7 weeks of Making the Difference program, cognitive stimulation therapy, and then the 3 elements of the education: the community, the dementia, GP dementia, and the carer. And then we did the 8 weeks physical exercise, which was facilitated by an exercise specialist. And we had facilitator manuals for all this as well. Here's just some nice pictures that was done within the group, and you would see these on our website. In the cognitive stimulation therapy, we had collages, for example. They were making, the people with memory problems, dementia, made some lovely collages. They brought them home, and some of them put them into frames and really enjoyed that aspect. Here's an example of the exercises program, where we had the person with dementia and the older person would be helping each other doing the exercises. This is how it was laid out. Here's a picture of the older people who buddied the people with dementia in the exercises. And then this is a picture of the Community Dementia Awareness Program. And here is a picture of when we were delivering the care program in the intervention. This is one of the facilitators, Professor Casey, who was a facilitator that night. Now, recruitment, I must say this is the biggest challenge in this study. In total, we hoped it might take 2 months, 5 months, it ended up 8 months. The reason being, we recruited from 2 GP practice via the Health Research Board Primary Care Clinical Trial Network Ireland. But initially we had 15 potential GP practices who was interested. But with follow-up, phone calls, lots of engagement, nobody took up the offer. So nobody came on board and gave us any participants to recruit to the study. So we just had these 2 GP practices, which took over 2 months. Oh, sorry, I'm moving here. And they identified 48 potential participants from the patient's records. There were 17 potential dyads. That means the pairs means the person with dementia and their carer consented to be contacted by the research team. But when there was only 3 dyads, which is the pairs was eligible and consented to take part in the study. So From the GP recruitment, from those two GP practice, we only had 3. This is very small, so we had to alternate our recruitment strategy. So we got advice and we reached out to community groups such as Alzheimer's Society of Ireland, Western Alzheimer's and the HSE Care Group. And a total of 24 potential dyads referred to us as a research team. But when we looked at it, there's only 7 dyads who was eligible and consented to take part in the study, which means we were able to go ahead with 10, 7 and 3 dyads to consent in the study. Just to say that we had 10, but in the first week, one dyad dropped out, so we ended up having 9 dyads for the completion of the study. Here's some of the barriers to recruitment. Again, living independently, that there was no carer. The carer was living independently and the person with dementia was living on their own, so we needed them to be living together. There was health issues. People didn't feel they needed it. The timing wasn't right when we were doing the intervention for some people, and a lot of the carers was very busy. They were doing full-time work, still looking after people with dementia, so it didn't suit. And as regards the GPs, what they're said is that the stigma, a lot of them didn't want to be involved because the stigma around the dementia. They didn't want anyone to know that the carer or the person that their person or their spouse or the parent had dementia. So this was still, that stigma was seen to be very much apparent. The characteristics, I say we had 10 pairs, but for the duration of the study it was 9. We can see we had equal male to female people with dementia, and there was 1 male and 9 carer females. And the relationship with, sorry, this is jumping on me. The relationship with the person with dementia, there was 5 that was a spouse, and there was 5 that was a parent to the person with dementia. The recruitment process, I suppose when we look at the feasibility and acceptability, that's what we were looking at to see, can we do a full randomised controlled trial? The leaflets and the consent forms are very informative, and they felt they were easy to understand. And the people with dementia and the carers really valued the phone call and the face-to-meet. We put on some information about the study for people, and they were able to come and attend. And we also followed up people with dementia to remind them of when the programs was happening, and they found this very helpful, and also we followed up by letters as well. The attendance and adherence rate was very good. You can see here that we had 100% adherence, and we had really good, 5 attended the full 6 sessions. Here just 79 was a little bit low, but still on looking at the literature, it is high. The exercise program, but it happened at a time when the people, it happened around the winter time, people were sick and they weren't able to attend. So that it was dropout because of illness and sickness. And really that's why that sort of came down. But overall, we were very happy with the attendance and hearing rates of the overall intervention. We had a number of tools that we used. Of course, we had a pre and post intervention tools. We did pre-intervention and then we did them post as well. And with regard to feasibility, most people with memory problems, dementia, prefer to complete the questionnaire with the researcher. And the carers was able to do them self-complete and they were fine. Participant rating was that most carers and people with memory problems and dementia rated the questionnaire as easy to complete. There wasn't many challenges, except for the stigma impact scale. The people with dementia found that a little bit more challenging. They had to think a little bit more, but they did complete it within the time frame, which was really good. The dementia awareness program, again, that was positive. People was very positive about that overall. And we used the HSE Dementia Understand Together presentation to do this, which was very helpful. And you can see you have some quotations there on the right-hand side, which you can read for yourself. What the facilitators really liked, and this program, because they could add person stories and comments, so there's some flexibility there. And when we evaluated the programs, they reported there was increased knowledge and there was more of an understanding of the perception of people with dementia. In the community awareness program, we had somebody to speak about dementia. It was a lived experience of somebody, but majority of the carers had concerns about the guest speaker because they felt that the dementia that person had was not the dementia that participants had, and this raised some concern. But some carers felt this was upsetting for the person with dementia. However, facilitators and some of the carers felt that the speaker's account was very personable and therefore was impactful. So going forward for a full trial, we would recommend that we'd have a script in advance of the dementia awareness program so that we would be able to have the content relevant and suitable for the audience going forward. But overall, the carers education program, there was a lot of enjoyment. Being one of the facilitators in the carer program, you could see the eyes light up the carers because they felt they were getting knowledge, they were getting tips about how to do things and communicate with their loved one with dementia. And they felt that the knowledge influenced the person, that they could see the person beyond the dementia, and they were seeing the person, not the person with dementia. And they really felt that they could put some of the strategies they learned in the course to the person they were caring for. There also was a looking after yourself session in the program, and they really found that useful. And some then had taken up the help of offered by others to go to the gym or go outside and socialise and get some time for themselves. So that was really powerful. They also found learning from each other very useful. And some of the carers set up a group and met outside after the carers program was completed, and they plan to do that after the continuation of the program, after completion of the program. We had lots of scenarios and videos and handouts, also was very useful, and they can always use those after the program as well to help them. They felt the facilitators were professional and explained things very clearly. And there was no recommendation going forward for the carers program. Everyone was very happy about that. The cognitive stimulation therapy program was the other intervention. Really, this here was the social aspect was really useful. They felt that meeting up with each other, working with each other, doing the group work with each other, doing the collages, it was a reminiscing and sharing with the group. And I know from this morning, it was about people coming together in engagement, and you can see this was really important for this people with dementia. And they felt that the flexibility in the content met the group's needs, and we felt that the manual was consistent. And some people reported improving cognition, that they were thinking better, they took up a few little hobbies, and they were interacting better with each other and getting to know each other. And the facilitators also viewed was very approachable and helpful according to the people with dementia. Also, the manual that we provided, it was very clear. I think one of the things that they felt was really useful was the tea at the start of the session. That tea really was sort of an icebreaker each time the session was held. That the facilitator, F stands for facilitator, P for participant, which is the person with dementia. Having that chat, having the tea and a cup, it really got them warmed into the session, and they really got started interacting. They felt sometimes that the session they wanted more time because they were really enjoying it, and getting involved in doing the different activities, like for example the collage I showed you earlier on. But it did depend on the facilitator. You really need to have a really specialist facilitator to deliver this type of a program, and to be able to meet the needs of the person with dementia. But the participants had no recommendation for change, but the facilitators felt maybe some minor change to the training, for example, maybe having bigger labels, having more newspapers, having more local and family pictures, and maybe having some scenes of local areas may also be really useful for people to interact and to reminisce on different things maybe within their locality. The physical exercise, again, they were all very positive. And as you say, they did this with an older person, and this was a body exercise for the person with dementia. They really felt pairing up with this exercise body was really useful. They got to know them. They found them very supportive. They got interacting, and they really enjoyed the whole aspect of that. They had some really good laughs. And some of the participants felt that the breathing was easier. They were more alert, and they felt they were getting more flexible as the exercises was going on. And one of the recommendations was that if we were to do this again for a full trial, that the setting up took some time. We'd need some extra time within the planning to set up the programme, because that does take a lot of time. Again, the manual and the time and the exercise is really good. They felt the exercise facilitator was very supportive, reassuring, and they demonstrated exercises when the person was having difficulty doing the exercise, the facilitator would go over it again with them. The size of the group and the different levels of exercise was challenging for the facilitator, because they felt maybe a smaller number might be better, but you would need to have more facilitators to run bigger groups. Both facilitators and co-facilitators have a really good background in exercise. So again, it's about targeting that specialist facilitator to run groups like this. And one of the recommendations that we were going forward was that the training was sufficient, but maybe a practical exercise for the older person. We just provided training and we didn't give them any sort of practical session of the exercises. So we felt that going forward, when we were doing the training for the older person, we also would give them some demonstration of the exercises that the person with dementia will be participating in. We also give the people with dementia some exercise diaries to complete. But this didn't go very well, because some reported they reviewed it. It looked easy, but some had forgotten how to do it. And most carers reported there was no awareness of having that the person with dementia didn't tell them that they had an exercise diary to do. Overall, we felt this wasn't feasible going forward to give people with dementia an exercise program diary to do. We also got people to wear a Fitbit. Again, this took up an awful lot of time in relation to the exercises, and it took up an awful lot of time from the researcher point of view, setting it up. And but people with dementia found overall the Fitbit acceptable. I suppose one of the challenges setting up was a lot of people with dementia didn't have smartphones, and that we relied on the carer's phone to sync this Fitbit with their phone. So that was the setup time, took that challenge. But overall, people with dementia found Fitbit acceptable, but only a few engaged in it and didn't engage with Fitbit features of the exercise diary. There was a lot of missing data. So overall, it was not deemed feasible to use Fitbits to measure activity or sleep data in people with memory problems or dementia. The GP program, education program, they rated it was very positive, and they felt it was really relevant to daily practice. They felt they realised it was very important to have a timely diagnosis of dementia, and they felt that benefits of giving a timely diagnosis for the person with dementia is very useful, because it will prepare them to cope better if they knew what was happening, and then provide the education as a result. GPs did not know in the community about the local dementia support services. So that was something that they, as a result of doing this, we were able to give them that support and that service that they could refer people to with a diagnosis of dementia. So really I come to the end. I know this is a very whistleblower tour of our study. And we have published a protocol in relation to this non-randomised trial in the pilot and feasibility studies. Is about to be published very shortly. But what we found the biggest challenge was the recruitment. And I know we need to identify strategies in order how to improve recruitment for people with dementia in Ireland. And there is a UK joint dementia research group in Ireland, in the UK, that has set up, that recruits people with dementia who was willing to be part of research. And we're at the moment trying to set up a similar group in Ireland in relation to that. So hopefully that might be something that will come out from the study that we'll set up, so we can recruit more people with dementia. Because again, as we can see from Niamh's presentations, it's very important we know the perspective of the person with dementia and what they want and what their perception is of everything. And we can't be guessing that's not ethical or morally correct. So I want to thank you very much. That's just some references that I have on the presentation. I just want to thank you very much for listening to me and giving you that very quick whistleblower tour of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Siobhan, for that very interesting presentation on a fantastic programme, so multifaceted. Thank you so much for giving us the presentation. Okay, I'm going to give a short presentation now. I didn't introduce myself at the outset. My name is Sinead Grennan and I'm CEO of Engaging Dementia. I am stepping aside shortly to Kim Tully will be taking over from me as interim CEO while I pursue a full-time master's in psychology. So today I'd like to give a very short presentation on the study that I did for my higher diploma in psychology. And the study was psychologists' perspectives on the experience of positive aspects of caregiving by caregivers of people with dementia. And my supervisor there is Professor Suzanne Guerin. So, well, how come the research? We know the figures about dementia in Ireland, the number of people who are experiencing it, and that it really is a major healthcare challenge. And I suppose that whole moral and financial imperative to improve supports for informal family caregivers. We also know that the people's choice is their primary choice is to live in the home. So looking and saying, okay, how can we support that to happen? So I just commented just very briefly here on dementia, the kinds of difficulties that people can have. Caring for a person with dementia, well, it's very well documented, the challenges that come with caring for someone with dementia, and there's a huge amount of research on what's called carer burden, the types of difficulties people can have: depression and anxiety, social isolation, psychological distress, and then physical and psychological ill health too. However, there also are positive aspects of caring, and I suppose more and more in recent years there is a focus on this, and people are looking at it and saying, okay, what are the positive aspects of caring, and then how can we support those? So research so far has, these are the kinds of areas that have been found to be positive aspects of caring. So the whole multiple positive dimensions: competence and role satisfaction, the opportunity of giving back and discovering inner strengths, that has also come up. Personal growth, protective role against stress and burden. So that's some of what the literature is currently saying. So this is what I was doing, taking a look at it, looking at the promoting factors, the role of healthcare professionals, and then the role of positive psychology. So I suppose positive psychology has that whole focus on resilience and strength, as opposed to the more traditional focus on deficit and disability when it comes to dementia. So you can see here, resourcefulness is something else that comes up, and flourishing. So this was a qualitative study. There were 13 psychologists who took part. They were based all around Ireland in a variety of settings, urban and rural: Dublin, Cork, Galway, Athlone, Meath, and then I did semi-structured interviews with them. So you can see there were clinical neuropsychologists and behavioural psychologists as well, across a range of settings. So this is what emerged from my study in terms of the kinds of themes that emerged: gains from giving, personal and emotional growth, positives in the context of negatives, finding meaning, and the family working as a theme. So they were the kind of broad themes that came up for me when I was looking at the findings of the study and what were the positive aspects of caring. So I'll just drill into it a little bit here, those different themes. So gains from giving, well, the kinds of comments that were made by psychologists when they were looking at their own experience, and I suppose from their professional expertise and background in that as well, what they have seen with from what family carers have told them about their experience, and they've seen feelings of pride and self-worth can come up quite a lot. Fulfilling the marital vows. So in Ireland, the majority of spousal care, of carers for people living with dementia, are spousal carers. The majority of people living with dementia are older, while there are people with young onset. So many of the spousal carers are married, and it did come up frequently, that notion of for better or for worse, that people had kind of signed up for the journey. And then a sense of giving back also, that came up quite a lot, particularly in the context of younger people who were caring for parents. I just put up some of the comments there, some of the quotes. So you can see that feeling appreciated and loved. That appreciation, when someone can verbalize appreciation, it kind of renews the person. And then finally, that closeness and that intimacy that comes from revealing your most naked, vulnerable self to someone and then them being there for you. So really quite profound personal growth, new skills and competencies. People discovered skills that they never thought they had. They developed new skills. There was a sense of purpose. So many people who were in the caring role spoke about this. And then the case manager role. So the person within the family who kind of is the main organizer. One of the psychologists commented on the waiting room dance. So, and when he would be working, identifying who the players are is kind of how he put it. So kind of getting a sense of the person living with dementia and then their support structure around them, the family around them, and all of the different dynamics there. Finding meaning. So care and devotion being at the heart of the caring role. Deepening relationships, and this was deepening relationships that were already healthy, and then deepening relationships perhaps where people didn't have a closeness before. So the two kind of came up. There was one family, for instance, who there was a comment about this family, mother and daughter, and they had always had what they would have felt a very difficult relationship down through the years. And then through dementia, they actually came to know each other more and to get to know each other and appreciate each other more. So that notion then as well of kind of personal transformation. So you can see someone there commented on something seems to take place, that people sometimes talk about this as kind of a thing, a time in their lives and just something that took place for them and changed them as a person. So you can see there people finding depths in themselves that they didn't know that they had, and it can really be quite profound. There was another comment there that someone made when they danced. It was really beautiful. This was about a couple, and it was the husband who was the carer, and he really found it quite difficult. Sometimes he found the caring role quite difficult, and his wife had always loved dancing. The two of them had always gone dancing together in their younger married days. And then now it was something that they did together. And somehow in that moment, I suppose bringing up a comment that Niamh made earlier on too, that present moment and just capturing it and appreciating it and living in that moment. Well, I commented earlier about carer burden and all of the challenges that come with caring that have been recognised. This theme did come up of positives in the context of negatives. So I suppose the psychologists, when they were looking at this and when they were exploring this whole area of positive aspects of caring, they weren't negating all of the challenges. So there are all of these challenges and difficulties, and yet positives can emerge during them, or positives can be experienced during them. So the challenges of caring that are there for everyone. And yet there's unexpected growth. Humor came up quite a lot. As you can see there, someone commented about this kind of almost black humor that can evolve, and people commented about just going with the flow, and you just kind of have to go with the flow sometimes, and that the psychologists had seen that sometimes was associated with a greater experience of positive aspects of caring. You can see resilience has come up there too, and resilience is something I know that some of the other speakers are looking at as well, and that kind of sense of resilience, people discovering it within themselves or people finding it or experiencing it. Some carers thrived in the role of caring, despite the worry, the frustration, the exhaustion, they thrived. Family working together as a team. So the family came out as a really critical part of the picture in terms of the experience of dementia by the person, and also the support structure, family rotas. Many families have family rotas to support the person who's living in the home, if they're living on their own, or if it's a couple, whoever is that kind of primary care unit. Relationships, I suppose, within a family. If the family had healthy relationships already, or if it was quite dysfunctional, and if there was a dysfunctional dynamic, those rifts could become even more accentuated, so it would become more fractured. For family members stepping up, taking part, playing their role, whether or not you can see there was a comment to the carers and the breezers. So I don't know if there are people here who have an experience of families or working with families, or if you're in the family home yourself and your family is involved, whether or not you see a difference in terms of the levels of support that people give. So people can contribute and support in different ways, but then there are others who don't really take part, and I suppose that's what the reference here was. So you can really have a window into how that cohesion, the family cohesion. So the factors that influence it, well, these were the kind of 4 key themes that emerged here: openness and acceptance. So accepting there isn't a cure, there isn't a silver bullet, and people who kind of accepted the situation they were in and just accepted it for what it was and moved on from there tended to have a more positive experience. The capacity to care. So everybody doesn't have the same capacity. Now, Kate Irving was commenting earlier on about the development of compassion and caring skills and how it can be learned and it can be taught, and through support people can develop them more. But there was a difference between people's capacity to care. Family dynamics, I've commented on earlier, that sharing of the load with siblings. So whether or not siblings do share or don't share being critical to the experience, and then engaging with others. So peer support, and I know with the CREST program, peer support was very much at the heart of that too. And the role that peer support played in being such a huge support at practical level, psychological, emotional level, the laughing, the joking, the sharing together, sharing with each other, and I suppose giving each other hope and encouragement, and through sharing stories, that being supportive, so supportive for people. So what can help? Well, validating and normalizing the experience. The role of the multidisciplinary team was also key here. Mobilizing family support. So given that family support is so critical to the experience of the primary care, and also the experience of caring and how that works out or not, given that that's so critical, well then mobilizing the family and supporting the family to work together really is key. And then mapping the assets of the person and the support structure, and taking a look and seeing, okay, so where are, and I suppose this also ties in with positive psychology, looking at the positives and saying, okay, well, this person has difficulties here, or this family has difficulties there. There are supports here, gaps and supports there, but where are the strengths and where are the assets that we can build from? So changing the narrative. So looking at, rather than a sole focus on burden, carer burden, looking towards thriving and flourishing and supporting people to have a more positive experience and to achieve more of a balance. Identifying opportunities for growth, that's for the person living with dementia, for the people in their support structure, and the promoting understanding, and then joining up the dots. So I suppose services, unfortunately, are really fragmented and supports, and yet within a person's immediate circle of support and broader, there are supports that can be found, but the challenge is joining up those dots. And there's some references, so thank you. I'll just stop my screen share here. So thank you very much for that. I will now hand over to Bernadette Phillips. So Bernadette is a researcher and a Montessori consultant, and she is going to be speaking about Montessori works for dementia. There's Bernadette.
Good afternoon, everybody. As you can see, the title of this presentation is Montessori Works for Dementia. Now, a brief introduction. This presentation centers around a project which evolved over a 4-year period, 2012 to 2016. When my mother, Mrs. Bridget Donnelly, was diagnosed with dementia. She was in her 80s, and my husband and myself took her to live with us so that we could look after her. Now, a little bit of background. My husband and myself ran Montessori schools for many years, and we also did a lot of research on Montessori topics. And in 2010, we came across an article by a man named Dr. Cameron Camp. And Dr. Cameron Camp is the pioneer of Montessori methods for people living with dementia. And in that article, Dr. Camp said something that really struck a chord with us. He said that he was beginning to see linkages between Montessori's approach and the translation of concepts in neuroscience into practical interventions for persons with dementia. Now, when we read this, we began a very serious study of Montessori methods for people living with dementia. And then 2 years later, in June of 2012, when my own mother was diagnosed with dementia, we decided to try to implement the principles of Montessori methods for dementia into the care of my mother. Now, we had a number of objectives and 3 main ones, and I'll just outline these for you. So objective number 1, our first objective, was to bring happiness and maybe even joy into my mother's dementia journey, and also into our journey with her by using this Montessori approach. And the Montessori approach, we had learned from our research, had been shown to reduce anxiety and depression in people living with dementia. And it had also been shown to reduce stress in family members who care for loved ones who are living with dementia. So that was our first objective. Then objective number 2, our second objective, was to identify my mother's remaining strengths. And so to create meaningful activities for her, which could help to preserve these strengths and maybe even build on those strengths. We were very optimistic. The activities were based on Montessori principles, which emphasize the need for, in every human being, for 6 things. And these things are, number 1, independence. Montessori continually emphasized the need in every human being, from the tiniest tot till the oldest of persons, the need for independence, the need to be able to do things for yourself, and the joy that comes from that. And number 2, the second principle, was work. And by that, I mean meaningful activity, something that has meaning for the person, that's related to the person's interests and so on. And so this would be a very strong Montessori principle for children and also for persons, older persons living with dementia. And the third principle is the principle of respect, that all of us as human beings have a huge need to be respected, and then we can reciprocate and give that respect back. The fourth principle would be the principle of self-esteem, the feeling of self-worth. Montessori was at pains to point out that as human beings, we have a desperate need for self-esteem, for self-worth. Even the tiniest child shows this, and it's still so true in an elderly person or a person with dementia. And the fifth principle would be the principle of contribution. All of us as human beings have a desperate need to feel that we can contribute. And if this contribution simply means setting the table for the family dinner, or if it's larger than that and it involves the wider community or society, it's still the same thing. It's a sense that the human being has of the need to contribute to others. And the sixth Montessori principle would be that of intergenerational living. This is not always possible, but if it is possible, Montessori continually pointed out that intergenerational living is important to all of us, hugely important as human beings. So that was our second objective. Our third objective then was to present these activities the Montessori way. And that would be to present the activities, first of all, with an emphasis on procedural memory, meaning muscle memory. And as we know, in a person living with dementia, often the semantic memory or the episodic memory is the part of memory that is impacted first. And often the procedural memory is the memory that remains much longer We often talk about how if you learn to ride a bike, you remember that for years and years and years. And that's because it's based on muscle memory or procedural memory. The second way to present the activities would be with few words. As we know, many persons affected by dementia would have language deficits, and it can be very confusing to present an activity to a person who has language deficits with lots of words. And so we need to do the same as Montessori advised for young children, and that would be to present the activity with very few words, to use very few words, to omit language as much as possible, and go very much with the physical presentation of the activity. And thirdly, we knew that we would need to present the activities with a progression from the simple to the complex. This is a very long known Montessori principle, to start with what's very simple and to progress slowly, taking note of the person from the simple to the complex. Fourthly, we knew that we needed to present the activities with a reduced tempo. Many of us, myself included, tend to talk too fast, walk too fast, present things too fast. So if we're presenting something to children or to an elderly person or a person with dementia, we need to remember to reduce our tempo, to slow down our speed, so the person has a chance to follow what we're showing them. And number 5, then, we knew that we needed to present the activities with the use of repetition, because it is well known, especially in neuroscience, that the use of repetition helps to fix the activity in the person's mind. So if there's an opportunity to present something and then repeat that presentation later on in the day or the next day, it's very important and very effective. And sixthly, we knew that we needed to present the activities with the use of materials that are self-correcting. It can be very disheartening for a person when trying to do an activity to find that they need to be corrected every minute and told, well, you're not doing that right, I'll show you. This is the same for young children, and it's equally the same for older persons who are living with dementia. So we knew that we needed to present activities that for the most part could be self-correcting. So the person could, if they were making a mistake, they'd be able to see for themselves what was wrong and be able to correct it themselves. So that was our third objective. So what were the measurable results of all of this? Well, we found that when my mother engaged in Montessori-based activities, even for a relatively short time, such as 15 minutes, the effect on her mood was definitely positive. And this positive mood usually lasted long after the activity had ended. And even when my mother had forgotten that she had done the activity. And number 2, we also found that on days when my mother did not engage in Montessori-based activities, she was definitely more prone to bouts of anxiety and depression, and these could take hold of her for days on end. And thirdly, we can confirm from our direct observations that the Montessori-based activities that my mother engaged in definitely helped to preserve her remaining strengths, and also gave her joy and a sense of being a valued member of the family, which was fantastic for us. And fourthly, we can also confirm that the levels of stress in family members who were helping to take care of my mother were reduced on the days when she engaged in Montessori activities. Well, the project was innovative in several respects, and I'll just list these here. A, the project took place in a family setting. B, it involved activities with 4 generations of our family, in that some of the activities were between my mother and her children, myself included, my mother and her grandchildren, my mother and her great-grandchild. And C, the activities didn't require any special materials. Most of the materials used in the activities were ordinary household materials, many of them using things you would find in your kitchen or in your sewing basket or your knitting basket, very much household materials. And D, all of the activities took place in the same room because my mother was not very mobile and it distressed her to move anywhere. And E, the activities were so easy to create that no specialist help was needed. All of this led to us writing and publishing a book entitled Montessori Works for Dementia, Everyday Activities for People Living with Dementia. And we brought that out in 2015. In January of 2016, my mother died of dementia. And we were obviously extremely sad at her passing, but we are so grateful that we as a family got to spend time with her. And a lot of that time was spent in the sharing of Montessori-based activities for people living with dementia. So I'd like to thank you so much for listening to our story.
Thank you so much, Bernadette, for that really great presentation. I will just bring everybody, while I'm bringing everybody back into the room, could I ask you, where could people buy your book?
It's for sale on Amazon and in many bookshops. It can be ordered through any bookshop, really. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, great. Okay, we have some people who are teaching courses in dementia. We were contacted by somebody in Canada just last week who wants to translate it into French to teach us courses. Okay. Okay, have they been, I know that Cameron Camp has been working with a good number of care centres over in France as well, so they're a lot further on than ourselves, I think, with Montessori. Yeah. I might, some comments have come into us on the Q&A, and I suppose, well, people are firstly thanking the speakers, but also I will start by asking Niamh a question, given that, Niamh, your story kind of resonated so much with the other presentations here today. Would it have been helpful for you to have had access to the CREST program or something like it?
Yeah, I think I was in a very fortunate position that I went into this role of caring with my professional background and training, and it definitely made me realize, you know, people who didn't have that could benefit from it. So I was very fortunate in that. So hearing about Siobhan's work, and I would have loved even more pieces. You know, Siobhan's work, I was delighted to see that, and I would echo, like, with her findings, I resonated with it. As you well know, the cafe was probably our most, like, in terms of all the services we accessed, the cafe was, I would go as far as saying, life-saving for us, because we could laugh and be with each other together. So yeah, I think I was fortunate that my professional background and training helped me going in to training, and I would be concerned or worried, or, you know, for people going in who have none of that. I think I was lucky.
Yeah, and the cafe, it's funny you say that, and then the CREST program, the kinds of areas that you covered, Siobhan, the cafe kind of brings it together. Now the Dementia Cafe Network has been established by Ireland. Engaging Dementia was commissioned by the HSE National Dementia Office. So the four pillars are information, community, atmosphere, support. So it's very much bringing them all together. There was a question that came in here for yourself, Siobhan, commenting on the eligibility criteria for your study that a lot of fathers hadn't met. So could you elaborate on that a little bit?
A lot of, what did you say, a lot of what?
A lot of the fathers didn't meet the eligibility criteria. So this is just someone talking about the sample.
The fathers? I'm not sure what you mean by the fathers.
This would be, now this wasn't a question that I asked myself, I suppose in terms of who was included in the study. So who were the primary participants then in the study?
Well, the primary participants were, we had carers, and they had to be living with a person with dementia. So they had to be living together in the same household. and they had to have a formal sort of diagnosis of mild to moderate dementia or memory problems, as you say. I suppose the other thing that they had to be diagnosed with the sort of the DSM diagnostic dementia on that, living in a community, and they need to be willing and sort of capable of being able to take part in an exercise program, that they're able to speak English and they're able to give consent. And I suppose the primary caregiver also had to be willing to take part in the study. So I suppose we did try tease that out with the GPs and everything when we're trying to follow. If it was to do with the recruitment and us and trying to get the GPs on board, then it was challenging to get them on board. But if it come to having only the 10 dyads, I think it was more to do with the barriers in relation to people not having enough time. People were busy. There wasn't enough maybe carers and people dementia living together. So there was sort of all those sort of elements. And we've tried to tease that out, but we've really got no real answers from our evaluation.
Okay.
I don't know whether that answers your question.
I've just realised that, yeah, I would say Aisling meant dyads, not dads. At the time when I saw it, yeah, I did. So tell me, for the speakers, has anything kind of come up for yourselves, having listened to the other presentations that kind of particularly struck you? So maybe, Siobhan, if we'd start with you, in terms of mindfulness or Montessori, did the people who participated in your study, did many of them have access to either one of those, or use them, find them helpful?
No, I mean, I think, listen to Niamh, that she said she was lucky that she had a sort of a training, previous training or her professional training. And the people we had with dementia, the carers with dementia, had very little help, very little resources offered, and knew very little about dementia. Absolutely, it was amazing when we were doing the education program with the carers, and the way they were, sort of their appetite for knowledge was so much that they wanted to learn so much. We used a lot of videos. We didn't, a lot of group work, a lot of videos sharing examples and things. And the way they were able to get support from each other and take some of that support with them. For example, there was a carer who said in the group that she feels that she has to, every time she goes to the person with dementia, she was saying to her husband who had dementia, she says, come on, hurry up now, I need to get on your clothes, we need to go here, we need to go that, we need to do an awful lot of things. And she felt on hindsight what she was doing, she was overburdening the person with dementia. But she felt she was talking down to the person. She wasn't actually talking eye contact and talking at a slow voice, like some of the things that Bernadette was saying, that Montessori skills would have been really useful. So we had to do some things about being able to say, your tone of voice, being able to look directly at the person. Those little communication strategies and tips was such, it was just amazing for that person to take that back. She saw a dramatic change in the person because she changed her approach in going to that person with dementia. And that was just one simple example. So yeah, their lack of knowledge was very much apparent, but after the program, and having the resources afterwards and be able to still access it and having printouts of everything really meant an awful lot to them.
Yeah, and actually that kind of links in with the comment that Kieran has made about the potential for more training and empowerment for people, for families who are visiting loved ones who are in care centres, and commenting there on, Montessori works and CST and, everything that can be done to support people to have a more meaningful visit. Some other comments, I suppose, about your experience too, Niamh, and how much that's resonated with people and how important it is to share. And those, if you wish, it would be, I'd love for you to make a couple of comments about the outdoors, because I know you have spoken about that before, the therapeutic outdoors, and how for your mother, what role it played for your mother as her language difficulties in particular kind of progressed as the dementia progressed.
Yeah, I think my dad had passed several years before Mum's diagnosis, and my dad spent a lot of time in the garden. And as the Alzheimer's progressed, this urge to care for her, I was often overprotecting her, and she would get distressed if her garden wasn't tended to. And I found myself, I would sit her on the chair looking out at the garden while I went out. And sure, that isn't what she wanted. She wanted to be in the garden. And I had to let go of, her knowledge in the garden was amazing, but she might kind of just have chinks where it drop out, and she knew she had to tend to the plants and cut the roses, but she might cut at the wrong space. And I actually realized it doesn't matter. Like, even if it meant that afterwards I would go and buy a new rose plant and put it in because she'd get distressed if it died. What was important was she was in the garden. She was doing something she loved, and it was a familiar space, and it was also with the senses. She just liked, I was sitting her on the sofa or sitting her on the chair in protecting her and letting her observe, and she wanted to do. So it was that learning for me. Like, it wasn't a natural thing, but it was actually realizing Mum wants to get in and do it. And yeah, the garden, just from the senses, it was just a lovely place for her and her grandkids. So I had to learn to step back and let them. They were the masters, under 7 and over 70s. They're the true wisdom.
Okay, and thank you for all the beautiful photos as well. They were so beautiful. Thank you. And before we finish up, folks, I'm just going to launch a really quick poll here. So everybody, it'll come up on your screen, maybe just to this people who are attending, just to give us kind of an idea about the session. And I will also encourage people to join the conversation on Twitter. So the conference is going on for the next 2 days, following finishing up with the Policy and Practice Forum that the Dementia Research Network of Ireland and National Dementia Office are co-hosting. So we're at Engaging Dem Ireland, and we have hashtag DementiaConf20. So do feel free to join the conversation there. So before I leave, I'll just say a very brief thank you so much to all of the speakers for coming here today and for sharing your time and your wisdom and your experience. So thank you
very much, Niamh.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.